Thanks for welcoming me here this morning. I'm not Karen. I'm not Karen in disguise. But my name is Ryan Cruz, and I started with Citizens for a Healthy Bay just this last September, so I'm the newcomer. And one of the things I do with CHB is I was responsible for our campaign to monitor the proposed methanol refinery here in the port. So spoiler alert, it's not going to happen. But it was a really big deal, to put it lightly. It was kind of the biggest social environmental cause in Tacoma since ASARCO, the single most important business decision. And so I think it's worth going over kind of what happened, what the review process looked like, where issues arose, and what ultimately led to the demise of the proposal. So I have a short presentation for you guys about that, and then I'm going to touch on some other things as well. So first, just getting into this so you know the lens through which I have viewed this situation, CHB's role. When we first learned about this, we decided that we wanted to serve as an information hub, a source of reliable information for the public about environmental concerns with this proposal, but also other information, the review process, how that was working, things like that. Because we wanted the community to be able to make informed decisions about what they wanted for the port and for port jobs. And we also were working with project stakeholders and the community and decision makers just to make sure that the future of Tacoma and its waters would be as sustainable as possible. So proposal overview. You probably know a lot of this information by now, but it was proposed by a Chinese-backed firm called Northwest Innovation Works. It was a $3.4 billion project that would take natural gas that had been fracked up in Canada and convert it into methanol. It would be built on the Blair Waterway on the site of the old Kaiser aluminum smelter. Cleanup on that site is not yet complete, but some cleanup measures have been done there from the smelter's operations. It was one of 3 plants that Northwest Innovation Works proposed in the Pacific Northwest. This one would have produced 20,000 tons of methanol daily. That is the size of the other 2 plants combined. Keep that in mind. So this was by far the biggest one that they had proposed. In fact, it would be the largest methanol plant anywhere in the world. The methanol would be shipped back to China, where it would be used to chemically manufacture plastics. So the methanol was not being used as a fuel source. A lot of people were confused about that when this first began. And this is a little infographic to show kind of the inputs and outputs of the refinery. You have a lot of water, you have a lot of gas, you have a tremendous amount of electricity. Such a large amount of electricity, and we're going to get into this later, that it would have had to be generated. TPU would not have been able to supply this because it was just such a huge increase to their electricity output as it was. Although the electricity would have been supplied by TPU, it would have had to be generated most likely. And then coming out of the refinery, you have unknown air pollutants. There was a lot of speculation about what would be in the air pollutants, and we have some ideas, but we never got official estimates for that. You have a heck of a lot of water vapor. Most of the water coming into the plant is lost as vapor. The methanol obviously comes out, and then you have wastewater, which is processed by the city of Tacoma. So in terms of the benefits that this would have brought to the community that Northwest Innovation Works would bill, in terms of jobs, they estimated 1,000 jobs at peak construction. That's everything from all different kinds of union workers and managers, and then 200 to 260 full-time jobs for ongoing operation of the facility. Environmentally, the process of taking natural gas and turning it into methanol was claimed to be more responsible than taking coal and turning it into methanol. You need a carbon source, so you can use petroleum, you can use coal, you can use natural gas, and natural gas is in many ways cleaner than the old school coal and petroleum sources. And then they also had a technology incorporated in the plant called ULE, or ultra low emission, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So this was kind of the billing for why the Tacoma community should welcome this facility. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the price. So number one, you had a pretty big water demand. They would have been using 7,200 gallons of fresh water per minute. That's 3.8 billion gallons of water per year. And that's especially concerning given the uncertain water future that Tacoma faces. I'm sure you all remember recently Tacoma was asked to cut down on its residential water usage significantly. Major industries use a lot of water. that's kind of a given. The Port of Tacoma has a lot of major industries that use a lot of water, but we do need to watch how we increase this usage when we're not sure what our water future is going to look like. Just so you know, the current prediction for the area is basically putting our seasons into the extreme. So droughts in the summer, storms in the winter. Instead of having a snow-fed watershed where the snow is melting continually throughout the year and feeding the rivers, we would have a primarily rain-fed watershed, which means the water level is going to vary much more widely. Electricity usage, 450 megawatts of energy required to run the facility at full operation. That's enough to power over 320,000 homes. And this is what the increase in TPU resource usage would have looked like. So you have electricity on the left, water on the right. The gray part of each circle is the current usage for TPU. The red part is the increase that would have resulted from this facility alone. And then the dots are actually for the West Rock paper mill, so that you can compare it to TPU's current largest user. Water, it's a pretty big chunk. That's a 19% increase is quite a lot. West Rock paper mill is a bit more, but that's still a lot of water. Electricity is astonishing. 82% increase in the total electricity usage for TPU. That's residential and industrial together. That's massive. And due to a number of complex reasons that I myself don't fully understand, because I'm a biologist, this excess electricity would most likely have been generated using natural gas. So right now, TPU uses a lot of hydroelectric, and that's great. I think it's something like 90%, somewhere along those lines. A lot of hydroelectric power, which is considered a very low carbon source of electricity. Natural gas is considered the most flexible source of electricity, so it's really easy to bring natural gas power plants online and control their electricity output. No one's building more coal plants, no one's really building any nuclear plants right now, so it would most likely have been generated using natural gas. And the reason that the electricity usage was so high is because of this ULE, ultra-low emission technology. Essentially, you have to preheat a massive furnace inside of the refinery. Traditionally, that's done by burning some of their carbon source, so burning more natural gas to preheat that furnace, and that has more carbon emissions from the plant. Instead, ULE would have used electricity to preheat the furnace, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. That electricity demand would have been huge because of that, and that electricity has to be generated. So they would have been burning natural gas off-site to generate that electricity, which means that while the outputs of the actual refinery might be low, the overall carbon implications of the project were still really high. And on that infographic I had earlier, you could see quite a lot of carbon would have been coming from the electricity production. Also, air pollutants. Air pollutants is kind of a tricky issue with this. There was a lot of, I think, misinformation spread about this. It was certainly cause for a lot of the public alarm that we witnessed in relation to this project. But some of the things that we know would have been coming out of this, CO2 and other greenhouse gases, various organic compounds that can be harmful. Some of them degrade rather quickly, so you're not actually going to get them accumulating into the environment. But while they're there, they can still cause harm. Fine particulates, respiratory irritants, things like that, and then sulfur dioxide, which can be a respiratory irritant as well and contributes to acid rain conditions, I believe. So air pollutants. And from here, I'm going to talk about what actually happened. So that was kind of an overview of the project, our concerns with it as an environmental organization, the things that we were looking for, watching for, and hoping for more information about so that we could put our fears to rest or sound the alarm. So number one, you had the SEPA review. That stands for State Environmental Policy Act review. This is an environmental review that all major projects have to undergo in the state. There is a federal version of it. The federal review came first, and then Washington decided it would be a good idea for us to do something like that as well. In this case, the SEPA review was led by the City of Tacoma's Planning and Development Services, and it's a really big deal. It would have taken well over a year to complete the review for this project. The review itself has various stages. It starts with something called scoping, where they essentially look at the proposal and they attempt to compile a list of all of the possible issues, environmental issues, sometimes human health issues that may result from the project. Once they have that list and public input is accepted, you can submit your official comment saying, I want you to look at how the water usage will impact stream flow and salmon in the Green River, something like that. Once they have that list, they will start preparing an environmental impact statement, or EIS. That involves independent contractors. The city will contract out with research firms to actually compile this information in order to keep it non-biased. And then once they think they have the results, they will release the results in a summarized document, still around 100 pages, but these things used to be bookshelves worth of binders of information. But now it's about a 100-page document as a draft EIS. The public will comment on that draft. They'll say you did a great job, or you didn't look into this, you didn't consider this, we need you to go back and consider these things. They'll take those comments into consideration as well and release a final EIS. And once the final EIS is released, the city of Tacoma would have an opportunity to suggest a future course of action. So that may mean we want to go with the project as it has been proposed. It may mean we want a smaller version of it. It may mean we want a different version of it, or it may mean the no action alternative, which is we don't want to build anything. But assuming it gets past that review, the project will then go on to its permitting stages. No permits can be given until the SEPA review is complete. And the underlined sections, scoping, the draft EIS release, and permitting, those all involve opportunities for public comment. And what actually happened was we started scoping, and there was an extremely high turnout for these public hearings that are held as part of scoping, where the public can come and give their comments orally as opposed to submitting them electronically. I mean, we had over 1,000 people in January showing up to these hearings. That's not usual. Usually you have a couple dozen people in a bored, stuffy room. They don't actually want to be there. And this was thousands of people bum rushing the microphone at one point. It was pretty astonishing. So the city responded quite admirably. They said, wow, the public really cares about this. We are going to extend the public comment period significantly. Usually they're only 60 days or so. This one was extended all the way to March 4th, so it would have been quite large. And they booked larger venues for the public hearings. They really responded quite well. So that was kind of the SEPA review as it was turning out. And we were almost at March 4th. We were in February when Northwest Innovation Works decided to pause their SEPA review. February 19th, they released a statement saying we want to halt the review process. Now, this review is required before they can begin permitting, so they would have had to finish this review eventually. So the pause struck a lot of people as being kind of strange, and a lot of activists and community members were speculating as to what caused this pause. As far as the official information, the Northwest Innovation Works said that they were surprised by the tone and substance of the vocal opposition that emerged in Tacoma. I can tell you that the vast majority of comments at these scoping hearings were in opposition to the project. They said that they would be using the next several months to engage the community and put these fears to rest and involve the community more, which is all CHP really wanted. We wanted this process to be open and transparent so that we could get the information we wanted and make up our own minds about what we want for our community. Other folks thought that this pause was being done to kind of let the fires die down so that they could resume this project later on when the heat had died off. But we never really found out because it didn't go through. The second big thing that happened, and this happened during this pause, things were quiet for a while, and then it turns out that the company had to apply for an extension of their lease with the Port of Tacoma. So they signed their lease back in 2014 for the Kaiser smelter site. This lease had various stages. It starts with something called feasibility, and that's the period of time designated for the SEPA review and permitting. After feasibility is construction, and construction is followed by full rent period. So that would be ongoing for 30-year lease. Well, the feasibility period was 24 months, and within that 24-month period, not much happened. Northwest Innovation Works did not complete the tasks assigned to them in the appropriate part of their lease. The SEPA review alone would have taken at least another year. So their feasibility period was set to end at the end of April, the end of this month. And so they had to apply with the port and say, we need more feasibility time. If they hadn't gotten that lease extension, they could have kept going with the review process. They could have moved into the construction period and not actually built anything, but rent payments would have gone up significantly. and they would have lost the option to back out of the lease. So in feasibility, they have the right to terminate the lease at any time for any reason. They can't do that once they move into construction. They're kind of bound to paying these really high payments or not paying and being held in default to their lease, which is not a good thing either. The extension was very vocally opposed by both citizens and my group, Citizens for a Healthy Bay. At this point, we felt that regardless of what they were trying to build, they hadn't shown themselves to be good neighbors. They had not released even basic information about the project. The SEPA review is necessary to get some of the finer points, but we didn't have a lot of the information we should have had by this point in time. And we'd had enough. And frankly, the port had had enough. The port is supposed to be their backers, right? The port's a municipal corporation. They want to generate economic growth in the community. They want businesses like this traditionally. And even the port commissioners were starting to voice a lot of frustration with this company. And so on April 25th, there was supposed to be, this last Monday, there was supposed to be a port hearing to decide whether or not the extension would be given. Northwest Innovation Works was asked to come and present to the port prior to the 25th and argue why they deserve the lease extension. Basically convince us that, well, we didn't use the past 24 months very much, but if you give us an extension, here's how we can guarantee we're going to use this period to do our job. And they said that they wouldn't come. They said that they were unavailable to meet with the port. And so no amendment was actually being drafted prior to the 25th. My suspicion is that they would not have been given the extension on that date. And that was really the main issue, this lack of information. And I think it's worth noting that when they paused their SEPA review, they had promised the community that they would be engaging the public more. They would be getting more information out, and they did not make good on that promise. Really, the only thing we saw them do to engage the public during that review process was to publish one new, pretty laughable propaganda video that was created a lot of public outrage. People were like, this was your idea of public engagement? Great, we just have more propaganda from you guys. We want real, solid information we can base our decisions on. And because of that, because they weren't going to get the lease extension, Northwest Innovation Works chose to terminate their lease on April 19th. That marked the death of methanol in Tacoma. Officially, their reasoning was, number one, they said that the existing contamination within the Kaiser site meant that development of that location would have been difficult. They said that they ran out of time in their feasibility period, and if they weren't given the extension, they would not have had time to complete their review process. That is very, very legitimate. And then also they cited uncertainties in the review process. And if that's a little unclear, I think that uncertainties means a while back a project like this would never have too much trouble getting its permits. It's rare to see a $3.4 billion major project, industrial project, halted like this, but the public had become so involved and so concerned, and the vocal opposition was so loud that it really pumped the brakes. It put pressure on the port commissioners, it put pressure on decision makers within the city of Tacoma, it put pressure on groups like Citizens for a Healthy Bay to monitor this thing more closely. And it meant that they weren't sure if they were actually going to get their permits or not when all was said and done. So they didn't want to invest that much money in an uncertain process. So they chose to terminate the project. They still have two other proposals that remain, one in Klamath and Port St. Helens. Each of those refineries are half the size of the one here in Tacoma. So it was an extremely powerful social movement to witness and to be a part of. Citizens for Healthy Bay is extremely proud to have played the role that we did as a factual decision maker and as a source of information for folks. There was a lot of table banging and on both sides at a time when, frankly, we all should have just been keeping informed and making up our own minds, maybe even withholding a final opinion for now. But and we're proud to have helped with that. So I said I was going to mention one other thing, and I guess this kind of leads me into what else is happening now that this is gone. What else is happening in the port? What should we be concerned about environmentally? So one thing I wanted to touch on was the largest source of contamination that still exists in Commencement Bay. It's the last of the Superfund sites that need to be cleaned up. It's called OxyChem for short, but it's the Occidental Chemical Pollution Plume. So on the Hylobos waterway, a long time ago, there used to be a manufacturing plant there that made solvents and chemicals for dry cleaning. And one thing I've learned as I've become a part of the environmental field is that dry cleaning is really, really nasty. Really, really nasty. The production of the chemicals is bad. The use of the chemicals is bad. It almost always leaves these pretty big pollution plumes, at least traditionally. And so you had this plant there. They released a tremendous amount of pollution into the ground and into the groundwater beneath their site. Occidental Chemical is actually formerly Hooker Chemical, the same Hooker Chemical from the Love Canal incident. So the track record of this company was not very good, to say the least. And since then, the plant is gone. A lot of it has been demolished. And the pollution plume beneath this facility is enormous. I mean, it is the size of several Seahawks stadiums beneath this thing, I believe. In terms of what you actually have down there, a lot gnarlier stuff than you would have gotten from the methanol refinery. You have a lot of chemicals that accumulate in the environment and stay in the environment. They don't degrade quickly, if ever. Things like PCBs, things that stick around and are highly carcinogenic. They'll give you cancer. To give you kind of an idea of how bad this is, the pH of the rock beneath this facility is that of ammonia right now. It is literally melting rock beneath this facility. And so we have to clean it up. It was designated a Superfund site. And where we're at right now in that process, Department of Ecology leads that process. Department of Ecology did an investigation, or they drafted a plan for their remedial investigation, basically saying this is how we will look into the problem, this is how we will monitor it, and then further down the road they would have come up with a cleanup plan that designates the responsible party and the levels that it needs to be cleaned up to and that kind of stuff. And then finally they would go do the cleanup. And then when they released their plan for their investigation, a lot of groups like Citizens for a Healthy Bay felt that it was woefully inadequate, that it really didn't adequately assess the problem. And so we submitted comments, a lot of other folks submitted comments saying you need to go back and rethink this, you need to add more depth to your review before you actually go do it. And we are currently waiting for Ecology to release their response to those comments, so basically how they will incorporate your comments into their investigation plan. Farther down the road in that project, there will be opportunities for public involvement, public comment. We've seen just how powerful that can be in methanol. These processes have always been in place, or at least they've been in place for a very long time, but they're not really used very much. A lot of members of the public don't even know about comment periods. They certainly don't know to participate in them. And even those that do are sometimes so intimidated by the process that they don't actually participate. And so our hope is that this methanol issue will have indeed brought something very positive to Tacoma. It will have brought a community of conservationists within Tacoma that are willing to speak up for future issues. Whether it's another industry that comes knocking on our door that we decide, you know, we want economic development within the port, but you're just not what we're looking for, or pre-existing things like, I don't know why I'm pointing at the projector. Thank gosh now. But or pre-existing contamination like Occidental Chemical. I've often told people that everything you were afraid about with the methanol refinery, well, it already happened, and it was way worse. And it was called OxyChem. So with that, I would love to take questions about either of these things or about anything Citizens Bay does.
Are the funds